Good morning, everyone. John471 here to discuss the S&P 500. Today is Tuesday, May 6th, 2025. Allow me to read our disclaimer. Derivatives trading is not suitable for all investors. Past performance is not necessarily indicative of future results. Let's begin today, as we always do, with our news. It's Tuesday. The FOMC meeting is beginning today. The announcement will be tomorrow, so there's a pretty good chance the market may begin to sort of look ahead to that number as we get into the afternoon and slow down a bit. In the morning at 8:30, we have international trade in goods. That's really our only data point that is scheduled today. There are some Treasury announcements into the afternoon, including a 10-year note auction. We do have some Trump activities on the calendar, nothing that looks too scary, but I would always keep your news feeds on, folks. Let's go to the charts. Okay, here we are beginning with full session daily bars with monthly profiles as we have recently. And just a few things to note on this chart about the general environment we're in, the general location. We had really been looking for a test of this March VPOC to see the S&P recover the March range, push up, and get a test of this March VPOC. We did that. Our next target on the way up was, or I should say is, the prior month's high. We are one time framing lower, putting in lower highs and lower lows on the monthly time frame. Where we are right now, there's a pretty good chance that we could take that out. The prior month's high RTH is 39. The prior month's high full session, as we can see on this chart, is in the 70s, 73.25. And then just above the 5821s are an a composite VPOC, the most traded price going back about 2 years. So there are plenty of targets if we're able to continue grinding higher. What we see happening here is basically that this March VPOC area, right around here, has been a very contested area of a big fight area between buyers and sellers. And once we pushed above, we see that we're kind of starting to overlap a little bit here. So how this area kind of breaks will be important. Do we want to fall lower and re-explore some of the auction levels below, or do we want to push above and take out the prices that I just mentioned? Those are the big things that we're wondering. It doesn't have to happen today. As I said, we're good chance we'll start to look ahead to the FOMC meeting today. So we might not get the move that we're looking for today, but maybe we do. Regardless, that's what we want to see on this chart. Let's move on to our next one. Okay, here's our market profile chart. I want to give a quick look on this chart. The thing that's important to notice here on this market profile chart is what we're seeing is starting right here, actually starting a little bit earlier. We're seeing value move higher. Then what happens on this day, we see our pullback. This was the day that we tested the 55, was it the, yeah, or I'm sorry, 54, 55 single print region. This was our pullback, but we seem to just reject prices below and bring value higher. Although it did pull back a little bit, but what we see the next day, a pretty strong response higher out of that area, taking value up higher, and then the next day higher still. So pull back, and then we sort of resumed with value moving higher. And we had been one time framing on the daily time frame and broke it yesterday. And as well, we moved value lower. Also, what we want to notice here, we opened right here. Yesterday was a fairly interesting day. We opened right here, taking the one time framing on the daily, on the daily time frame, which basically means we took the low, which we hadn't been able to do, as we can see here. Took the low and then immediately reverted higher, looking like we were recapturing the prior day's range, but we really didn't get too much done. We were unable to get to the prior day's settle or VPOC, which is up here, which is also the prior week's settle. So really, it appeared like we got some reversion. Maybe the buyer still had something, but they really didn't they weren't able to complete the job. They didn't get back up to settlement or the VPOC. So we have an open settlement from yesterday and the prior week. The high of this day, Thursday, is going to be pretty important here. The high of Thursday will be sort of my initial over underline. If we have any kind of a rally, that will be getting above this area will be pretty much what I'll need to consider structural longs. But what we're about to see on the next chart is we're already kind of we've already pushed the prior day's low. So let's go on to that. Okay, here we are on our intraday chart, full session. This is a PNF chart, so these bars are drawn according to price movement, not time. That's why they may look a little bit odd if you're used to using only time-based candles. But regardless, so here's Friday. Here's that area I talked about with the prior week's settle, prior week's high, right in this area. As you can see, this is what we did on the reopen. We were unable to test this prior week's settle. It's a little bit higher than all this. Then during the day yesterday, as I mentioned, we kind of opened right here. We found some buyers and pushed higher, but we were unable to get to that prior week's settle and really did not show much interest in trading above the 5,700 mark before reverting lower to settle in a fairly bearish way compared to how most of the day looked. And as you can see, overnight we continued through. Now yesterday, you'll remember I put a lot of emphasis on this piece of structure and this piece of structure. These were two very important pieces of structure, and they still are, in my opinion. What we saw yesterday was buyers, or whoever, buyers came in and tried to hold in a similar way to what we saw here, and it worked during the day, but sold off. And as we see here, we're testing these prices overnight, and whatever bid seemed to be here was not here anymore. So that really brings this area, in my opinion, this is a very important area now today. This area is very important. And this area that we put in yesterday is also very important, along with the high of Thursday. So what do we have to consider today? I'm going to begin with bearish ideas, and I'll tell you how I personally am looking at this today. We have the prior day's low right here. There's a potential we're going to open in a gap. It's looking like we might. And then we have this area here, the Thursday high up to about Century. So this is how I'm looking at things. I would not be surprised to see us open and start to revert higher to attempt to close the gap and potentially push into the prior day's range. I wouldn't be surprised to see that. However, I have to tell you that, in my opinion, I'm really not going to be looking for a structural long unless we can fight above if we can get above first these 72s and really show acceptance between 72 and 82 in this area, 72s and 82s. If we can show acceptance there, then I would potentially be interested in a structural long to push higher to target the prior day's high and these obvious targets we have in this 5,700 up to 5,710 area, prior week settle, and the VPOC from 5.2. This is the key structural target on the long side, but I'm not going to be interested in trading it until I see us get above the 72s and hold the 72s to 80s. Anything else, I will expect us to eventually kind of revert lower and start to see this sell pressure continue. So we'll just go over that again because it's pretty much the key to the whole trade, in my opinion, today. That is to say, any kind of a pullback into the prior day's range, as long as we're below the 72s, I am going to not be very surprised if we see it start to continue lower to take out the overnight low and potentially this gap zone. But for me to look structurally long, we would have to be holding the 72s and really get into the 80s, in which case that would open it up to target the 5,700 to 5,710 area and the targets in that range. let's go over some ideas of how this could look besides the one that I just gave you, which is basically holding this overnight low, giving us a beautiful pullback, which we'd all love to trade, and then failure in the prior day's low. How else could this happen? Well, because I feel like this is a fairly obvious situation that we're looking at. Like, I feel like a lot of the participants kind of see the same things I'm looking at. What we might get instead is just immediate bearishness. This really actually wouldn't surprise me today. I'm not going to expect it, but if I start to see evidence, it wouldn't shock me. So how would that look if we got immediate bearishness? Well, we're kind of balancing down here. So what we could see is just a little bit of a balance, an attempt higher to try to get back into the prior day's range, but instead we hit into this structure around yesterday's low, touch it, boom, fall lower. At that point, I would be looking for the overnight low and a test of this gap zone. This area is very key because, like I said, it's around this structure, which I think is important. If we hold this gap zone, then that could easily become a lick check that pushes us back into range and kind of gives us maybe not a structurally bullish move, but maybe just a reversion that gives us closes the gap and or touches 70s. As I've said, I'll just consider that a pullback unless we get above the 70s into the 80s, as I said. But regardless, what happens if we don't see the support in this area? Well, I got to tell you, if we don't see support here around the 5,600 and we see a push below 5,600, give one retest, trying to get back, and it can't do it, then I would be open to seeing a little bit of stops go off below this area for a trade from the gap zone down to the prior month settle, and potentially a little bit of extension below. That is to say that if this area doesn't hold, I wouldn't be surprised to see a little bit of a flush below that takes the prior month settle and maybe moves down to the 75s. We have some zones to target there. Let's put those up quickly. Yeah, this prior month settle would be a key area. Noting also this prior month settle as a target is the 50% of the prior week. Let's double check that. Where's our weeks? Yeah, so right here, if we get this push into the gap zone, what we see is this structure that is potentially support below. So that's what I'm saying. If we take this area, I would expect a push down into this prior month settle region. If we're unable to get back above, then I would be open to continuation lower with the prior week's VPOC here in this balanced area. But if we can get back above this area, then that would start to look like reversion to me. Bullish ideas, how could the bullish ideas happen? They would have to, pretty much like I said, they have to get above this 82 to the 72 to 83 area. Getting above the 72 to 83 area, then I would be open to targets of the 57 to the 57.10 region. What would our nothing day look like today? Just a second here. Well, for me, our nothing day would pretty much be anything that doesn't meaningfully take the gap zone, does not meaningfully fall below the gap zone, but also does not meaningfully get back into our settlement area. So basically our nothing scenario would be anything from about 56.08 up to about 56.70. It's a wide range, but we have pretty wide ranges lately. So that would be kind of the outside in situation I'd be looking for, with support at the gap zone and resistance around the 70s and definitely at the 80s. But above the 80s, I'd be looking for the 10s. If we get below this gap zone, then I'm looking for prior month's settle and potentially the prior month's VPOC, as I've said. So just tying a bow on it, the pieces of structure to keep your eyes on today, in my opinion, are without a doubt this area, very important. Below here, I would expect to see some stops go off. This area right here from yesterday is going to be the key area that could potentially unlock a test of the 80s. If we're able to hold the 80s, then I would expect continuation up to test the 5,700 to 5,710 area. If 5,700 to 5,710 prior week settle, if this area is tested and accepted, then that to me would really ignite potential bullishness for a test of the prior week's high and continuation higher. If we go higher, we've been talking about our targets for a while, 39s and 76s if we can continue. That's what I got for you today, 15 minutes. I'm going to wrap it up here. Hopefully that was complete. Any questions, ask me in the chat room. Also, if you're watching on YouTube, I'd like to ask you to please like and subscribe. Help us get to 10,000 subscribers if you're finding any utility here. Or if you just like to hear somebody talk about charts in the morning, that works too. Hit that like button. But that's what I got for you today. Any questions, ask me in the chat room. I hope you're having a wonderful morning. I hope your wonderful morning continues. And most importantly, I hope you find some way today to improve your trading that is not dependent upon your P&L, but is dependent upon your process. That's what I got. Ciao.